The scorching New Mexico sun beat down on Fort Stanton's dusty town square as Sophia Lawson pressed her palm against her swollen belly, the world suddenly spinning around her. The summer of 1873 had brought unprecedented heat to Lincoln County, and at 7 months pregnant with no husband in sight, she had pushed herself too far trying to purchase supplies before the afternoon stage departed. "I just need to make it to the general store," she whispered to herself, her vision clouding as beads of sweat trickled down her temples. The distant chatter of townsfolk faded as blood rushed in her ears. Her knees buckled beneath her calico dress, and as darkness encroached on her vision, she felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Through the haze, she heard a deep voice laced with concern. "I've got you, madam," the stranger said firmly, cradling her against his chest. When Sophia's eyes fluttered open moments later, she found herself looking into the face of a man she'd never seen before. His features were sun-weathered but kind, with eyes the color of the sky after a storm and a jawline shadowed by several days' worth of stubble. The brim of his well-worn Stetson shaded her from the harsh sun. "There you are," he said with relief evident in his voice. "Thought we'd lost you for a moment." Sophia became acutely aware of their position, her body supported in the arms of a complete stranger while curious onlookers gathered. Embarrassment flooded her cheeks as she tried to stand. "Easy now," he cautioned, helping her to a nearby bench outside the mercantile. "You're in no condition to be rushing about in this heat." "I'm fine," she insisted, though her lightheadedness hadn't fully subsided. "Just a momentary spell." "The baby sometimes presses on," she stopped, realizing the impropriety of discussing such matters with a stranger. "Name's Yates Porter," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Just rode into town yesterday." His gaze dropped momentarily to her swollen middle, but there was no judgment in his eyes, just concern. "Sophia Lawson," she replied, straightening her dress. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Porter, but I really must finish my errands." "Not alone, you're not," Yates stated matter-of-factly. "No offense intended, madam, but you nearly cracked your head on the boardwalk. Least I can do is make sure you get your supplies and back home safely." Sophia wanted to protest. She'd managed on her own since her husband's death 4 months prior, but the persistent dizziness made her reconsider. "Very well, Mr. Porter. I suppose I could use some assistance carrying my purchases." As they entered Thompson's general store, whispers followed them. Fort Stanton was small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, and the sight of the pregnant widow with a handsome stranger was prime fodder for gossip. "Pay them no mind," Yates murmured, sensing her discomfort. "Folks get bored in small towns." "They've had plenty to talk about since James died," Sophia replied, her voice tight. She picked up a basket and began selecting items: flour, sugar, coffee, and a small jar of molasses, luxuries she rarely afforded herself these days. "Your husband?" Yates asked quietly. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Pneumonia took him this past March. He never even knew about the baby." Yates fell silent, respectfully allowing her space as she continued gathering supplies. When she approached the counter, he stepped forward and placed several coins beside her smaller pile. "Mr. Porter, I cannot accept. It's not charity, Mrs. Lawson," he interrupted gently. "Consider it payment for the advice I'll be needing on where to find honest work around these parts." Sophia hesitated, pride warring with practicality. Finally, she nodded. "Then I suppose we have an arrangement. Though I warn you, there's not much work to be had in Fort Stanton these days, unless you're looking to join the cavalry at the fort." "Military life isn't for me," Yates replied, gathering her parcels. "But I'm handy with horses and can turn my hand to just about anything that needs doing." As they stepped back into the glaring sunlight, Sophia pointed toward a modest cabin at the edge of town. "That's my home there with the blue door. James built it before we married 2 years ago." They walked slowly, Yates matching his stride to her careful pace. Along the way, he told her he'd come from Texas, working his way north after selling his small ranch following his father's death. "No wife waiting somewhere?" Sophia asked, then blushed at her forwardness. Yates' smile held a trace of something somber. "No, madam. Never found the right woman to settle with, or perhaps never stayed in one place long enough to look properly." When they reached her cabin, Sophia felt an unexpected reluctance to end their conversation. There had been precious little company since James died, and Yates Porter carried himself with a quiet dignity she found comforting. "Would you care for some coffee, Mr. Porter? It's the least I can offer for your help today." He glanced at the sky, judging the hour. "I'd be obliged, Mrs. Lawson, thank you." Inside, the cabin was small but meticulously kept. A patchwork quilt brightened the modest bed in the corner, and dried wildflowers hung from the ceiling beams. Yates set her packages on the table and removed his hat respectfully. "Please sit," Sophia said, gesturing to the table as she busied herself with the coffee. The familiar routine steadied her still shaky hands. "You mentioned needing work," she said as she placed a steaming cup before him. "Old man Winters at the livery might need help. His arthritis has been troubling him something fierce this summer." "I appreciate the tip," Yates replied, sipping the strong brew appreciatively. "Been sleeping in the livery since I arrived, so that would work out fine." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "No room at the boarding house?" "No money for it," he answered honestly. "Got enough saved for a few meals and not much else. Figure I'd find work before spending what little I have on luxuries." His frankness was refreshing after months of townsfolk tiptoeing around her, with pitying glances and whispered concerns about her ability to manage alone. "Well, Mr. Porter," she said, settling carefully into her chair, "if you're truly handy as you claim, I have a leaky roof that needs patching before the summer storms hit. I can offer you supper in exchange. Nothing fancy, mind you." Yates studied her for a long moment. "Most widows wouldn't invite a strange man to fix their roof. Most strangers wouldn't catch a fainting pregnant woman in the town square," she countered. "I'd like to think I'm still a decent judge of character, Mr. Porter, despite recent hardships." He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow then, if that suits. I'll bring my tools." As Yates departed, tipping his hat in farewell, Sophia leaned against the doorframe. For the first time in months, she felt something other than grief and worry. It was just a flicker, a momentary lightening of the constant weight on her shoulders, but it was something. True to his word, Yates appeared the next morning with tools borrowed from the livery. Sophia directed him to the worst of the leaks, then set about her own chores while he worked. By midday, the sound of his boots on the roof had become an oddly comforting background to her mending. "Mrs. Lawson," he called down, "you've got some damaged shingles up here. Might take a bit longer than I expected." "Take whatever time you need," she replied. "There's water in the bucket if you get thirsty." By late afternoon, he'd repaired not only the roof but also a loose shutter and the sagging front step. When he finally came inside to wash up, his shirt was damp with sweat and his hands raw. "You didn't need to do all that," Sophia said, setting a bowl of stew before him. Yates shrugged. "Didn't seem right leaving things half done." They ate in companionable silence, and afterward, Yates insisted on washing the dishes, claiming his mother would haunt him if he let a pregnant woman clean up after feeding him. "Did you speak with Mr. Winters?" Sophia asked as she dried the bowls. "I did. Starting tomorrow, I'll be helping at the livery. Pays not much, but it comes with a room above the stables." "That's wonderful news," she replied, genuinely pleased. Fort Stanton could use more reliable men. A shadow passed over his face. "I don't know about staying on permanent like. Never been one for putting down roots." "Of course," Sophia murmured, surprised by her disappointment at his words. "Well, should you need anything while you're here, my door is open. It's the least I can offer after your kindness." In the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Yates would stop by every few days, always with some small repair to make or heavy chore to handle. Sophia would insist on feeding him in return. Their conversations grew easier, less formal, as summer deepened. Fort Stanton buzzed with speculation. The widow and the newcomer had become a favorite topic at church socials and in the mercantile. Some whispered that Sophia was being scandalously forward. Others suggested Yates was taking advantage of her vulnerability. "Let them talk," Sophia told Yates one evening as they sat on her porch, watching fireflies rise from the grass. "People will always find something to gossip about in a town this size." "Still, I wouldn't want to damage your reputation," he replied, his voice serious. Sophia gave a bitter laugh. "My reputation? I'm a pregnant widow who can barely make ends meet. The proper ladies of Fort Stanton decided my fate the moment James was laid to rest." "That's not fair," Yates said quietly. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met." His words settled around her like a warm blanket. "Tell me about Texas," she said, changing the subject before emotion overwhelmed her. "What made you leave?" Yates was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. "After my father died, there wasn't much holding me there. The ranch was small, barely profitable. I sold it to a neighbor who'd been wanting to expand. No other family. My mother passed when I was 15. No siblings." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Truth is, Mrs. Lawson—" "Sophia, please," she interrupted. "After all these weeks of you fixing my home and me feeding you, I think we can dispense with formalities." A smile tugged at his mouth. "Sophia, then, truth is, I've been drifting since the war ended. Served with the Confederate cavalry, though I had no love for their cause. When it was over, I couldn't seem to settle anywhere for long." "And yet you've been in Fort Stanton for nearly a month now," she observed. Yates looked at her, his gaze steady. "I have at that." The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, and Sophia gasped, pressing her hand to her side. "Are you all right?" Yates asked, half rising from his chair. "Yes, just this little one making its presence known," she assured him, then hesitated before asking, "Would you like to feel? That is, if it's not too improper." Instead of answering, Yates knelt beside her chair and waited. Sophia gently took his hand and placed it on the spot where the baby was most active. For a moment, nothing happened, and then a definite thump pressed against his palm. Yates's expression transformed, wonder replacing his usual reserve. "That's something," he breathed. "Yes, it is," Sophia agreed, suddenly aware of how close he was, his face illuminated by the lantern hanging from the porch beam. She could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the way his mouth curved when he smiled. He seemed to realize their proximity at the same moment and cleared his throat, withdrawing his hand. "Getting late. I should head back to the livery." "Yes, of course," Sophia replied, flustered. "Thank you for fixing that windowsill." "Anytime," Yates said, settling his hat on his head. "Good night, Sophia." As August ripened into September, Sophia found herself watching for Yates each day, her heart lifting whenever she caught sight of his tall figure approaching. She told herself it was merely appreciation for his help, but deep down, she recognized the dangerous truth. She was developing feelings for a man who'd already said he wouldn't stay. One afternoon, as she struggled to hang laundry with her ever-expanding middle making the task difficult, Reverend Miller's wife appeared at her gate. "Mrs. Lawson," the older woman called, her thin face pinched with disapproval. "I was hoping we might have a word." Sophia suppressed a sigh. "Of course, Mrs. Miller. Would you care for some tea?" "I'll not be staying long," the minister's wife replied, following her to the porch but declining the offered chair. "I've come on a matter of some delicacy." "I see," Sophia said, though she didn't. "There has been talk, Mrs. Lawson, concerning your friendship with that cowboy from the livery." Sophia straightened, one hand automatically going to her stomach. "Mr. Porter has been kind enough to help me with tasks I cannot manage in my condition. I fail to see how that merits gossip." Mrs. Miller's lips thinned further. "A young widow in your situation must be above reproach. Having an unmarried man call on you regularly, staying until all hours. He repairs what needs fixing and occasionally shares a meal in payment," Sophia interrupted, her temper rising. "Nothing improper has occurred under my roof." "Perhaps not, but appearances matter, Mrs. Lawson. Think of your child, of the example you'll set. A woman without a husband's protection is already vulnerable to speculation." "I thank you for your concern," Sophia said stiffly, "but I am quite capable of managing my reputation and my household." Mrs. Miller sighed, her expression softening slightly. "The church ladies and I simply worry for you, dear. These final months before the baby comes will be difficult. If you would allow us to help instead of that drifter, Yates Porter is a good man," Sophia said firmly. "And while I appreciate the church's concern, I would prefer to choose my own friends." After Mrs. Miller departed with a disapproving sniff, Sophia sank into her rocking chair, trembling with suppressed emotion. The woman's words had struck a nerve. What was she doing, allowing herself to grow attached to a man who'd made it clear he was just passing through? That evening, when Yates arrived with a rabbit he'd snared for their supper, Sophia was uncharacteristically quiet as they prepared the meal together. "Something troubling you?" he asked, expertly dressing the meat. Sophia hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Mrs. Miller paid me a visit today. It seems the good people of Fort Stanton find our friendship inappropriate." Yates's hand stilled. "I see. She suggested I rely on the church ladies rather than—" she faltered. "Rather than a drifter with no roots and no prospects," he finished for her, his voice carefully neutral. "Those were not my words," Sophia protested, "but they're true enough." He resumed his work, not meeting her eyes. "Perhaps Mrs. Miller has a point." "Yates, no, you have your child to think of," he continued. "Your standing in the community." Sophia felt tears threatening. Damn these pregnancy emotions that seemed to amplify every feeling. "I don't care what they think." "You should," he said gently. "This is your home. These people will be your neighbors long after I've moved on." The words stung, though they were nothing she hadn't told herself 100 times. "And when will that be?" she asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. "When do you plan to move on?" Yates looked up then, his expression troubled. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've stayed longer in Fort Stanton than anywhere since the war. That should tell you something." "Tell me what?" He set down his knife and wiped his hands on a cloth. "That maybe I'm tired of drifting. That maybe I've found something worth staying for." Sophia's heart stuttered. Yates, a sharp knock at the door interrupted whatever she might have said. Yates moved to answer it, his expression closing off once more. Sheriff Cole stood on the porch, his weathered face grave. "Evening, Mrs. Lawson Porter. Hate to disturb you, but there's a situation at the livery. Seems some drunken soldiers from the fort decided to take exception to Mr. Winters charging them for boarding their horses." "Is he hurt?" Yates asked, already reaching for his hat. "Got a nasty cut above his eye, but he's more rattled than anything. Problem is, those soldiers are still there, threatening to burn the place down if he doesn't return their money." "I'll handle it," Yates said grimly. "You'll do no such thing alone," Sheriff Cole replied. "That's why I'm here. Need some level heads to help calm things down before someone gets seriously hurt." Sophia stepped forward. "Be careful," she said to Yates, not caring if the sheriff raised his eyebrows at her concern. Yates nodded once. "Lock the door behind us. I'll come back when it's settled." The night stretched endlessly as Sophia waited, alternately pacing and rocking, her mind conjuring increasingly dire scenarios. Finally, well past midnight, a soft knock roused her from a fitful doze in her chair. She opened the door to find Yates, his shirt torn and a bruise darkening his jaw but otherwise intact. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, pulling him inside. "What happened?" "It's handled," he said wearily. "The soldiers are sleeping it off in the sheriff's cells and Mr. Winters is patched up. The livery's fine, just some broken tack that can be mended." "And you?" she asked, leading him to a chair and pouring water from the pitcher. "Nothing serious. One of them landed a lucky punch before the sheriff got his rifle out." He drank deeply, then winced as the motion pulled at his bruised face. Without thinking, Sophia dipped a clean cloth in the water and gently pressed it to the darkening mark on his jaw. Yates went still under her ministrations, his eyes never leaving her face. "Mrs. Miller would have a conniption if she could see us now," he murmured. "Mrs. Miller can mind her own business," Sophia replied firmly, continuing to tend to him. When the cloth touched a small cut near his eye, he sucked in a sharp breath. Sophia murmured an apology, her free hand coming to rest on his shoulder to steady herself as her belly made it difficult to bend. "I was worried about you," she admitted softly. Yates reached up and captured her hand against his cheek. "I'm not worth your worry, Sophia." "You don't get to decide that," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't get to decide what or who matters to me." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Yates stood slowly, still holding her hand, bringing them chest to chest with her rounded belly between them. "I should go," he said, but made no move toward the door. "It's late," Sophia replied. "You could stay on the porch. The nights are getting cooler." Yates smiled faintly. "Now you're just trying to scandalize Mrs. Miller." "Perhaps I am," she admitted with a small answering smile. In the end, Yates accepted her offer of a blanket and pillow, settling onto the porch swing for what remained of the night. Sophia slept better knowing he was just outside her door, though she refused to examine too closely why that should be. Morning brought clarity and a return of propriety. Yates was gone when Sophia awoke, the blanket neatly folded on the swing. A note tucked beneath explained he'd gone to help Mr. Winters assess the damage to the livery. The incident with the soldiers altered something in Fort Stanton's perception of Yates Porter. Word spread quickly of how he'd stood with the sheriff against the drunken troublemakers, defending old Mr. Winters and his property. Suddenly, the mysterious drifter was viewed with newfound respect. Even Mrs. Miller seemed to soften her stance when Yates appeared at Sunday services the following week, clean-shaven and wearing his best shirt, though he sat in the back pew alone. Sophia felt the weight of stares when he tipped his hat to her after the service, but for once, they seemed more curious than judgmental. "You've become quite the town hero," she teased as they walked back to her cabin, a respectable distance between them on the dusty road. Yates looked uncomfortable with the observation. "Just did what needed doing." "That seems to be your way," she replied thoughtfully. "Doing what needs doing without any fuss or expectation of thanks." He shrugged. "Growing up poor teaches you to handle your own problems and help neighbors when you can. Nothing heroic about it. And yet you keep helping me, week after week." They'd reached her gate and Yates stopped, his expression suddenly serious. "Sophia, there's something I need to tell you." A cold weight settled in her stomach. "You're leaving," she said flatly. "No," he replied quickly. "That is not yet, but Mr. Winters has offered me a partnership in the livery." Sophia's eyes widened. "Yates, that's wonderful news." "He's got no family to leave the business to, and his hands pain him too much these days to manage alone," Yates explained, a hint of wonder in his voice. "Said he's never seen someone with my touch for troubled horses." "So you'd stay in Fort Stanton?" "Permanently," he nodded slowly. "I'm considering it. It would mean roots, a real place in the community." "What's holding you back?" Sophia asked, her heart pounding with possibilities she scarcely dared acknowledge. Yates looked at her, really looked at her, his gaze so intense she felt it like a physical touch. "The same thing that's kept me here this long," he said quietly. I don't understand, don't you?" His voice was gentle. "Sophia, I care for you, more than is proper given your situation. If I stay, people will talk. They'll say I'm pursuing a vulnerable widow, that I'm not respecting your mourning." "My mourning for James ended the day I buried him," Sophia said with sudden clarity. "I grieved the man and the father my child will never know, but we had a marriage of convenience more than passion. He was kind and I respected him, but what I feel for you is—" She trailed off, unable to find adequate words. Yates took a step closer, close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. "What do you feel, Sophia?" he asked hoarsely. "Alive," she whispered. "You make me feel alive again." For a breathless moment she thought he might kiss her right there in the street, but he merely took her hand and pressed it firmly between both of his. "Think on this carefully," he said. "If I stay, if we continue this friendship, there will be talk. Your child deserves a mother whose reputation is unsullied." "My child deserves a mother who is happy," Sophia countered. "And I am happiest when you are near." Yates's expression softened. "Then I'll stay, at least until the baby comes. We'll take each day as it arrives and make no promises beyond that." "Fair enough." It was more than she dared hope for. "Fair enough." As September gave way to October, Sophia's time grew near. Her belly was enormous now, making even simple tasks exhausting. True to his word, Yates had officially joined Mr. Winters at the livery, moving into the small but comfortable room above the stables. He still came by daily, chopping firewood for the coming winter and ensuring Sophia had everything she needed. The town's attitude continued to evolve, as they observed Yates's dedication not only to his new business, but to the pregnant widow. Some still whispered disapprovingly, but others, particularly those who'd known James Lawson, seemed to recognize that Sophia deserved whatever happiness she could find. "Doc Wilson says you should be walking more," Yates told her one crisp afternoon as golden leaves spiraled from the cottonwoods. "Says it helps prepare for the birth." Sophia made a face. "Walking feels like I'm carrying a watermelon between my legs." Yates laughed, the sound warm in the autumn air. "Nevertheless, I'm under strict orders to make sure you get some exercise, just to the creek and back, nothing strenuous." Grumbling good-naturedly, Sophia allowed him to help her with her shawl. The October air held a bite that warned of the winter to come, but the sunshine was pleasant as they made their slow way toward the small creek that marked the edge of town. "Have you thought about names?" Yates asked as they walked, his hand supportively at her elbow. "If it's a boy, James, after his father," Sophia replied. "For a girl, I'm less certain. Perhaps Elizabeth after my mother." "Both fine names," Yates approved. "Strong names for a child who'll have a strong mother." They reached the creek and found a fallen log to rest upon. Sophia sighed with relief as she took the weight off her swollen ankles. "I'm frightened, Yates," she admitted suddenly. "About the birth, about raising a child alone, about how we'll manage through the winter." "You're not alone," he said firmly. "I told you I'd stay until the baby comes, and I meant it. And after, she couldn't help asking. What then? Yates picked up a stone and skipped it across the water. That depends on a great many things. Such as, he turned to face her fully, such as whether a respectable widow could ever consider marrying a former drifter with nothing much to offer except his hands and his heart. Sophia's breath caught. Yates Porter, are you proposing to me? Not exactly, he said carefully. More, exploring possibilities. Your child will need a father figure. You could use a partner. I've grown powerfully fond of you these past months, and I hope you feel something for me too. I do, she whispered. But marriage, we've never even, she broke off, blushing, kissed. Yates finished, a smile playing around his mouth. That's easily remedied if you're willing. Heart hammering, Sophia nodded once. Yates leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind before gently pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, questioning rather than demanding, and over far too quickly. When he pulled away, Sophia found herself clutching the front of his coat. That was nice, Yates suggested, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Very nice, she agreed, suddenly shy. I'm not asking for an answer now, he continued, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Think about it. Pray about it if that helps. I'll abide by whatever you decide. The walk back to her cabin was silent but companionable, both lost in thought about the future suddenly opening before them. 2 nights later, Sophia awoke to sharp pain and dampness between her legs. Her water had broken, a full 3 weeks before she'd expected. Panic gripped her as another contraction seized her body. It was the middle of the night, and her nearest neighbor was elderly Mrs. Abernathy, who was deaf as a post. The doctor lived clear across town. When the pain subsided enough for her to think, Sophia dragged herself from the bed and managed to light a lamp. She needed help, and there was only one person she trusted enough to call upon in this moment. Wrapping her shawl around her nightgown, she staggered to the door. The livery was only 4 buildings away, but it might as well have been miles given the contractions that kept doubling her over. Nevertheless, she forced herself forward, one painful step at a time. Halfway there, another contraction hit with such force that Sophia cried out, clutching at a hitching post for support. The sound must have carried on the still night air because suddenly, Yates was running toward her, hastily dressed with suspenders hanging loose at his sides. Sophia. Good God, what are you doing out here? He reached her just as her knees gave way. The baby, she gasped. It's coming. Without hesitation, Yates swept her into his arms. Hold on to me, he instructed, already turning back toward her cabin. Doc Wilson, no time, she moaned as another contraction gripped her. It's happening too fast. Yates's face went pale in the moonlight, but he nodded resolutely. Then we'll manage ourselves. My mother was a midwife. I've seen births before, even helped with one when no one else was around. The relief Sophia felt at his words was overwhelming. Of course, Yates would know what to do. Yates always knew what to do. Back in her cabin, he laid her gently on the bed, then efficiently built up the fire and put water to boil. He found clean linens in her chest and laid them out, his movements calm and purposeful despite the gravity of the situation. I need to check your progress, he said, his voice steady. I know it's not proper, but propriety be damned. Sophia ground out as another contraction hit. This baby isn't waiting for the doctor or a wedding ring. Yates barked a surprised laugh, then grew serious as he examined her. The baby's crowning already. You must have been in labor for hours without realizing. Is everything all right? Fear threaded through her voice. Everything looks exactly as it should, he assured her. You're going to need to push with the next pain. What followed was the most intense experience of Sophia's life. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined, but Yates never left her side, alternately coaching and comforting, wiping her brow and supporting her back as she labored to bring her child into the world. Just as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the window, a lusty cry filled the cabin. Tears streamed down Sophia's face as Yates placed a squirming, red-faced infant on her chest. "You have a son," he told her, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "A perfect, healthy boy. James," she whispered, stroking the downy head. "Hello, my darling." While Sophia marveled at her newborn, Yates efficiently tied off and cut the cord, then delivered the afterbirth with practiced hands. He cleaned both mother and child, then changed the bedding with Sophia barely having to move, his care so gentle and thorough that fresh tears sprang to her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said as he settled a clean blanket around them. Yates sat on the edge of the bed, looking at her with an expression so tender it made her breath catch. "Seeing you both safe is all the thanks I need," he replied, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. James immediately caught his finger in a surprisingly strong grip. "Look at that," Yates murmured. "Strong like his mother." "Stay with us," Sophia said suddenly. "Not just until dawn, not just until someone else arrives. Stay with us for good, Yates." His eyes met hers, searching. "Are you certain?" "This is an emotional moment. I've never been more certain of anything," she interrupted. "I love you. I think I've loved you since you caught me in the town square and said, 'I've got you.' You've had me heart and soul ever since." Yates's face transformed with joy. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, then the baby's, before finally claiming her lips in a kiss that promised forever. "I love you too," he said against her mouth. "Both of you." They were still thus entwined when Dr. Wilson arrived, having been fetched by Mr. Winters when Yates didn't appear for work. The old physician took in the scene with raised eyebrows but made no comment as he examined mother and child, declaring both in excellent health. "Seems you managed just fine without me," he said, packing up his bag. "Though I wouldn't recommend such haste next time." "Next time," Yates echoed, looking slightly dazed. Dr. Wilson chuckled. "You two aren't fooling anyone. The whole town's been waiting to see when you'd make it official." He nodded toward the baby, though this young man's arrived a bit ahead of schedule. After the doctor left, promising to send over one of the church ladies to help out, Sophia and Yates looked at each other and burst into laughter that they quickly muffled to avoid disturbing the now sleeping infant. "So much for propriety," Sophia said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "We could marry today," Yates suggested, only half joking. "I'm sure Reverend Miller would oblige, especially with Mrs. Miller breathing down his neck about setting a good example." "And give the gossips nothing to talk about. How cruel," Sophia teased. More seriously, she added, "Let's wait until I can walk down the aisle without waddling. 2 weeks should suffice." 2 weeks to the day after James's birth, Sophia Lawson became Sophia Porter in a simple ceremony in Fort Stanton's small church. She wore a blue dress that matched Yates's eyes, and he wore a new suit purchased with his first profits from the livery partnership. Baby James slept peacefully in Mrs. Winters's arms throughout the service, waking only when the congregation's applause signaled the completion of the vows. "Mrs. Porter," Yates said with satisfaction as they walked from the church amid a shower of rice and good wishes. "Mr. Porter," Sophia replied, leaning into his side, her heart fuller than she'd ever thought possible. Their wedding supper was hosted at the hotel, a gift from the townsfolk who had gradually shifted from suspicious observers to supportive neighbors. Even Mrs. Miller seemed genuinely pleased as she cooed over baby James and offered unsolicited advice on child rearing. When they finally returned to what was now their home, Yates, having moved his few possessions in the day, before Sophia felt a moment of shyness. Despite the baby making it clear they'd already been intimate, this was, in truth, their first night together as husband and wife. Yates sensed her nervousness and smiled gently. "Nothing needs to happen tonight that you're not ready for," he assured her. "The doctor said 6 weeks anyway." Sophia blushed but returned his smile. "There are other ways to be close," she said boldly, surprising herself. Yates's eyes darkened. "Yes, there are," he agreed, drawing her into his arms for a kiss that promised many such nights to come. As winter settled over Fort Stanton, the Porter household found its rhythm. Yates threw himself into his work at the livery, gradually implementing improvements that brought in more business. Sophia cared for James and began taking and mending to contribute to their income. Her skilled needlework soon in demand throughout the territory. Christmas arrived with a heavy snowfall that transformed the dusty town into a wonderland. Sophia decorated their small home with pine boughs and red ribbons, determined that their first holiday as a family would be special. On Christmas Eve, after James was tucked into the cradle Yates had crafted for him, they sat before the fire exchanging modest gifts. Sophia had made Yates a new shirt, and he presented her with a delicate silver pendant he'd ordered all the way from Santa Fe. "There's one more gift," Yates said as the mantel clock chimed midnight, "though it's not ready yet." "What is it?" Sophia asked, curled against him on the small sofa. "Mr. Winters and I purchased the plot next to the livery," he explained. "Come spring, I'm going to build us a proper home, more room for James to grow and for—" He hesitated. "For what?" she prompted, looking up at him. "For the brothers and sisters I hope he'll have someday," Yates finished, watching her reaction carefully. Sophia's heart swelled. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. "A house full of children with their father's blue eyes and stubborn chin." "And their mother's courage and heart," Yates added, drawing her closer. As the new year of 1874 dawned, Sophia often found herself thinking back to that scorching day in the town square when she'd fainted into the arms of a dusty cowboy who'd promised, "I've got you." How those simple words had changed the course of her life, bringing her from the brink of despair to this abundance of joy. True to his word, when the spring thaw came, Yates began construction on their new home. The entire town seemed to take an interest in the project, with men volunteering their labor on days when their own work was slow. By midsummer, the Porter family moved into a sturdy 2-story house with room to grow, and grow they did. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined them the following year with another son, Samuel, arriving 18 months later. The livery prospered under Yates's management, eventually expanding to include a blacksmith shop and harness repair. Sophia, no longer the fragile widow who needed rescuing, became a pillar of the community herself, organizing aid for families in need and teaching young girls to sew at the newly established school. On the 5th anniversary of the day they met, Yates surprised Sophia with a picnic by the same creek where he'd first kissed her. James, now a sturdy 5-year-old, played with his siblings under the watchful eye of Mrs. Winters while the couple enjoyed a rare moment alone. "You ever regret it?" Sophia asked as they lay on a blanket watching clouds drift across the New Mexico sky. "Staying in one place when you were used to drifting." Yates propped himself on one elbow to look at her, his face still handsome though now lined with the responsibilities of fatherhood and business. "Not for a single moment," he replied. "You and the children are my anchor in the best possible way." Sophia reached up to touch his face, marveling that this man, this good, steadfast man, had chosen her and their life together. "When you caught me that day, did you have any idea where it would lead?" "Not specifically," Yates admitted with a smile. "But I knew the moment I held you that I'd found something worth holding on to." "And you've never let go," she murmured. "Never will," he promised, sealing the vow with a kiss as sweet and true as their first. In the years that followed, Fort Stanton grew and changed with the territory, weathering the transitions from frontier outpost to established community. Through it all, the Porters remained a constant presence, their love story becoming something of a local legend. And if occasionally a newcomer would ask how they met, Sophia would smile and say simply, "I fainted in the town square and this handsome cowboy caught me. He said I've got you, and he's had me ever since." Yates would always add, his eyes never leaving his wife's face, "Best catch I ever made." Long after the dust of the Wild West had settled into the pages of history, their descendants would tell the tale of the pregnant widow and the drifter who found each other against all odds. It was, they would say, a love that began with a simple act of kindness and grew into a legacy that would define their family for generations to come. For Sophia and Yates Porter, what started with a moment of weakness became a lifetime of strength, built day by day through unwavering commitment, and a love that, like the frontier itself, refused to be confined by convention or expectation. Every anniversary, until they were both gray and surrounded by grandchildren, Yates would whisper those same words in Sophia's ear, "I've got you." And every time, her heart would remember that scorching day when a stranger's arms had caught her, not knowing they were catching her heart as well.